thank you everyone for coming, and welcome back to the Rain Bar. We were here 2 years ago. Who would have thought we wouldn't have met in between? We were ready to come back last year and celebrate the victory that we had, the victory that blue-collar conservatism was right at the heart of, when we threw the shackles of the Labour Party right across the north of England, because nobody likes to be taken for granted. And we proved to them that we speak for working people, and there are now millions of people who've got MPs who will stand up for them. Blue-collar conservatism, we want to be part of making sure that we keep that. We've always said that we don't want Labour light, although currently we might have got a few policies that are a bit full-strength Labour, but we'll probably come on to those on another occasion, because if there's one thing that every one of us in this room are sick of, it's being told what to do. We've just had lockdown, all of the freedoms we took for granted, the state has come along with its long tentacles and it said you can't do this and you can't do that, and these are basic freedoms we never would have expected. So, absolutely none of us here want to have trivia laid on top, a nanny state that tries to tell us what we can eat, and little things that we can do. And we've got a Conservative government. We shouldn't be talking about the nanny state. We've got to fight back. And we have some real champions tonight who are here to stand up the nanny state. So first I want to welcome Esther McVey, who 2012 launched Blue Collar Conservatism with me. Esther, come on out. First row. Yay! Yay! And she's just nicked a balloon. Have you got a balloon? They're great for the kids. Right, now we are so happy to have a man who's probably not generally described as blue collar, but what a star of our movement he is. I'd like to welcome Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's got a blue collar. It's better than last year. None of our speakers turned up with a blue shirt, so blue-collar conservatism doesn't extend always to sartorial choices. So, next, I would like to welcome Claire Foxx, a champion of standing up against the nanny state. Come on, Claire! Sit on the mic. Right, so I would like to welcome now a man who, like Jacob, has followed the dress instructions, Mr. David Davis. Look at that fine blue collar shirt. I see a few blue collars in the audience. Cufflinks are not always considered like a working class thing, but who would want to leave without buying one of our cufflinks, which are 25 quid, so attach one of those to your shirt before you leave this evening, and I will get back to some real champions who've taken the fight to Labour. I want to welcome Ben Bradley, the man who brought down Mansfield in 2017 and turned into a safe seat in 2019. And now, what can you say? This guy, yes, he smashed that red wall. He's probably still got bits of brick dust on his hands. Mr. Lee Anderson! And finally, last, and I'll let you two judge whoever leads, a man who has consistently opposed the nanny state since being elected in 2005, Mr. Philip Davis. Would you like to go first?
Why, thank you very much indeed. Look, we're all here because as Conservatives and people who believe in freedom, it's because we want our freedoms back.
Yeah.
And I have to say, having met with Sir Richard Dearlove the other week, who was former head of the MI6, and he said that he was shocked how we've lost our freedoms. He said it was worse in the last 18 months than anything he had seen during the Cold War behind the Iron Curtain. We had so readily handed over our freedoms. And today we have to start that movement to get our freedoms back. So I want this as a bit of fun. I want us to speak openly and freely. Yes, there is a mic there is a mic down there. And I'm a Conservative because I believe in freedoms. I believe in freedom of expression. I believe in freedom to go about your day-to-day being. I believe in freedoms from excessive taxes from the state. So that's why I'm a Conservative, but you know what? We've gone off course in the last 18 months and we need to get back on track. Jacob!
Esther, thank you for inviting me, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along. Many of you will know I'm very much in favour of nannies. I think they're absolutely marvellous. I think the more nannies the better, but not the nanny state. There comes an age when you have to make decisions for yourself. I will have reached that one day, but I'm in favour of liberty. There's a great saying of a Bishop of Peterborough, I think, from the 19th century, who said England free rather than England sober. And I think that is the right way to be, that we want to encourage liberty, and we need to recognise as Conservatives that you, ladies and gentlemen, make better decisions as to how to run your lives than anybody else can do for you. Even Esther, I'm sure she would advise you brilliantly, but actually you can lead your lives better for yourselves, and those decisions that you make lead to a better construction of society than central control. And that every time a little bit of liberty is given away, we find that society works less effectively. But we have to defend the liberty of others to do things that we don't like. I walked here this afternoon surrounded by a splendid group of protesters who do not share my views. Indeed, they may even think that I am Tory scum. But that is their right. And they have the right to shout, and they have the right to holler, and they have the right to walk alongside me. They don't have the right to hit me and Duncan Smith. But they do have the right to protest and have their voice heard. And so liberty is about protecting the rights of those you disagree with, probably even more than the rights of those you agree with, because that's the easy part. But we must maintain our freedoms. I'm glad that the COVID regulations are temporary. They will go. Bear in mind, Second World War regulations were finally abolished when Harold Wilson was Prime Minister. They lasted over 20 years. We must make sure emergency regulations this time go on schedule. And that is, I'm glad to say, government policy. I'll hand over to David.
Well, you know, in the last 18 months, I've realised what a fantastically good idea it is to tell people when they can go to work, how they'd raise their children, what they should eat. You know, daft, isn't it? I mean, we've had the best demonstration of our case that you could possibly ask for. I've had more demands to speak at this conference than ever before. Why? Because freedom has suddenly become fashionable. Take something away from people and they realise how much they value it. Now, I don't have Jacob's experience with nannies. But he will know as better than all of us that the one thing about nannies is they know what they're doing. Whether you can say the same about the nanny state is a debatable question, to say the least. No, it's not a debatable question, it's obviously not true. So, Jacob's made the point of freedom. I want to make a point that relates to the fact that we are blue-collar Conservatives here. You know, the Tory party has actually rested on a working-class vote for most of its history. People don't think about this. I mean, before 1950, right back through the previous 150 years, we got most of our votes from the working class. And we didn't get it by bribing them. We didn't get it by pandering them to some idea of what they really want, by being some sort of labour organisation. The reason, actually, it's a very unfashionable thing to say, but the reason working class people voted for Tories in the further past is because, one, we thought we knew what we were doing, which hopefully will prove to be true at some point. Two, yes, you got that point. Two, we weren't like the sort of Quaker liberals and puritanical about the things, their small pleasures in life. They're smoking, they're drinking, they're betting on the dogs or the racing. Yeah, and as a result, they returned us year after year after year. They were also patriotic. So those were the reasons. So one of the things I worry about with our party at the moment is that we think that the way we hold on to the northern, the so-called red wall seats and now blue wall seats, the way we hang on to them is by being Labour light. That is absolutely the wrong thing. And it's very patronising. It's presuming that these people aren't very smart. They're just as smart as anybody else. And they know what they want. And they know when they want to go home at the end of the week, they want to keep most of their wages. And they want to be able to pay their own bills and make their own way and build their own career and protect their own families and support their own community. And all of that comes from freedom. Not from being told what to do, but knowing what to do for yourself, your family and your community. And that's what we're about, and that's what we're going to support, and that's what we're going to fight for in the Parliament. Be aware of that, Jacob. We're going to fight for it in the coming years. Now I'm going to pass you over to my brother, Philip.
Thank you very much. David's been having to defend me ever since I've been in Parliament as well. Can I just say it's actually nice to be on a panel where I'm the most left-wing person on it. Which doesn't happen very often. Look, I mean, for me, it's very sad that we're having to have an event like this as a Conservative Party conference when we have a Conservative government with an 80-seat majority. I mean, this is the type of event you would expect us to be having when there's a Labour government in power. And I think just the fact that we're having this event and so many people are here should show the party how worried we all are that they're going down an anti-freedom route that will be better suited to the Labour Party. And there are people here who are inside government and outside government who are arguing for freedom and that should always be the core Conservative value. And I hope you can be reassured that in Parliament we will be fighting for that case and that you have people in Parliament who are actively doing that. But the thing I've seen in Parliament since I've been there, which is what worries me the most, is that when I first got into Parliament in 2005, there was generally a view of live and let live. People should make their own choices, make their own decisions, whether we agree with them or not. And I think Jacob and David were absolutely right when they said, believing in freedom is believing in allowing people to do things that you don't approve of yourself. That is what freedom's all about. And the thing that worries me in politics and amongst MPs across the House to a large extent is that we've got to a point in politics where I see people stand up in Parliament and if they think something is good, they want to make it compulsory for everybody. And if they happen to think something is bad, they want to ban it for everybody. And I see this more and more and more in Parliament, not just on the other side of the House, I'm afraid, including sometimes on our side of the House. And I find that really, really worrying. And it's been chilling to me. I found it really chilling how over the last 18 months, people have been frightened into giving up their freedoms so easily. I never thought it could possibly happen that people in this country would in effect be frightened into giving up their freedoms as easily as they have. And so we've got to be really, really, on the ball in defending freedom. This isn't something that, we should take for granted anymore. I thought it was something that we could take for granted. It isn't. It is something that we here are going to have to fight for within the Conservative Party and across the political spectrum. So let's make sure that we stand up for that fight and we never allow any government of any colour ever again to take away our freedoms as easily as we've seen over the last 18 months.
Yeah, how dare you? My credibility's shot enough already now. So I'm not a Conservative, I'm not blue, I don't know what I am, but if I'm having an identity crisis, my God, the Conservative Party is. I went into the House of Lords, that was odd, and I went in under lockdown conditions, so it was even odder. But I genuinely have been shocked that when I have raised the issue of freedom or liberty in the House of Lords, I've been utterly sneered at as though I was a complete lunatic, and that was by the Conservative Party. I mean, it was the Tory front bench who treated me as though I was raising these awkward questions, and I think that's pretty grim, right? I also speak to you on a day in which, well, last week I did a lot of media stuff on Keir Starmer's inability to answer the question about who had a cervix and to mention a woman. Well, you laugh. Today, Boris Johnson, the leader of the Conservative Party, refused to answer the question about what a woman is in relation to a cervix. Come on, there is an identity crisis going on here. I also wanted to just mention that, there's, I think, some confusion about red wall voters. I'm sure that you get this, but I wanted to just say something. I've talked to a number of people since I've been here who seem to imagine that red wall voters that you won over, give them a bit of extra money, talk about immigrants a lot, and they'll be happy as Larry. So take the care workers who at the moment have decided that they are prepared to lose their jobs on principle rather than be mandated to have a vaccine. I personally am a great enthusiast for vaccines and have argued with a number of people I know who are care workers that they should have one. But they are prepared to sacrifice their livelihoods on a principle. In other words, red wall voters might in some instances be unskilled and low paid, but they're not there to be bought off or have their freedom bought off. What they want is to be treated, and their agencies to be treated, with some respect. They are your equals. They are Boris Johnson's equals. They are the members of the House of Lords equals, more than their equals, and they do not want to be condescended to or patronised. And that is a big mistake, and they won't be bought off easily. Final couple of things. I've just done a fringe meeting, or I can't remember when, I've done so many, I can't remember what's going on. But anyway, I did something on the online safety bill. This is the Conservative Party of this country taking their lead from the National Union of Students' Safe Space policy, along with psychological damage should be enough to get you banned. And I thought they were against all that sort of stuff. You read the online safety bill, it could be written by identitarian activists from the NUS. Don't the Tories dare sneer at student activists when you're doing exactly the same thing. Similarly, Extinction Rebellion, abhorrent, anti-humanist, absolute nuisance, and all the rest of it. But it's their philosophy, which is anti-progress, anti-freedom, think they know best against anyone else. The problem is, whilst they might not be chaining themselves to the walls, it is exactly the same sentiments that I hear in the Lords, in day, out day, in relation to net zero policies. Behaviour change in relation to net zero is actually the greatest threat to freedom, even a greater threat than the online safety bill, because it presumes to know better than millions of people in this country and change their behaviour accordingly. So the nanny state, as we used to know, I used to worry that they banned smoking and were worried about sick drinking and all that. That's all old hat. This is a root and branch attack on people's capacity to have sovereign control, self-determination of their own lives, and it's scaring the hell out of me. And although I don't depend on the Conservatives as allies, God knows, I would have hoped that some of you would be allies, which is why I was delighted when Esther asked me here. Because you've got to do something about this, right? You are actually in power. Do something powerful with your own party, represent the people you represent by taking on your own party. The Labour Party are irrelevant. Ignore them. Your problem is the Tories.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to be clear before I start, I have not got a cervix. Checked last week.
I thought you had it checked before you came up here. I've seen that on TikTok.
Anyway. I just want to say, we've been responsible really for locking you lot away for about 2 years now, and that was a very difficult decision. It's not something I was proud of, as a new MP, we walked into this pandemic 18 months ago, and we've lost your way. And for myself, I want to say sorry for that, and I won't ever vote for it again, because I think it's been absolutely awful. I've seen how my community suffered. I've seen how my friends and my neighbours and my family suffered. And I see you out tonight, and it's wonderful, actually, to see human beings out again drinking and socialising and having fun. That is the best medicine ever for people, just to get out. Cheers, everybody. And I think, human beings are wonderful creatures, and we give ourselves a tough time. But we've been on this planet for thousands and thousands of years, and I think we're pretty good at making decisions. Yes, we've had the odd war, we've dropped the odd nuclear bomb and stuff like that, but on the whole, we're pretty good. We're pretty good. We used to live in caves thousands of years ago, and now we're sending men to the moon, aren't we? So on the whole, we're pretty good as human beings. We might pick bad leaders every now and again, and actually bog it all up you lot, but on the whole, we're pretty good. So we should let people like you make your own decisions. Now, we talk about Nanny State, and we have been in Nanny State for 2 years, 18 months now. I like to say that's our fault. But you know what? There is a bigger Nanny State out there, and we're free of that, and that's the European Union. Thank goodness we're out of that, because the rules and regulations that we had to abide by, they've gone now, so now it's our job, and this lady is quite right, it's our job as Conservatives, and I'm incredibly proud to be a Conservative Party member of Parliament. As you probably know, I used to be a Labour councillor, and in my area, which is the typical red wall seat, the typical Labour voters, like my mum and dad and my grandma and granddad, they are very socially conservative. They was brought up with strict conservative values. You go to work, you work hard, you make sure your kids get a good education, and if your kids, we didn't have nannies, I'm sorry Jacob, we didn't have nannies. If your kids do a little bit better than you, then that's progress, and that's all we want in the red wall areas. Thanks for listening.
Look, we live in the most educated and informed society we've ever had. If we can't form our own opinions on things, we can at least Google everybody else's, scroll down our Facebook newsfeed and figure out the best of the averages of what we read through, and we can all probably trust ourselves to at least do that. If you scroll past it, just check some second opinions before you necessarily pick up on it. But look, we're in a position at the minute where we've embedded this nanny state, for want of a better word, where we've embedded this interventionism, this large government, tax raising, finger poking into people's businesses kind of scenario over the last 18 months, and it's more important than ever over the next 18 months that we remake the case for freedom and liberty, because we could continue to just drift in this direction where emergency powers roll on for a little bit longer than we need to, where we are telling people that they can only meet at certain places if they've got masks on their face, and if they can only come to the pub. How nice is it to be back in the pub? We were here 2 years ago, and this place was rammed. It was brilliant, and conferences, the first proper normality I think we've had in party politics, probably almost since then. We've got this opportunity this autumn, and frankly we're going to have to maybe say some things, Jacob, in the comments over the course of this autumn, I'm afraid, about things like the obesity strategy, and about things like the online harms bill, that are potentially really, really challenging to the nature and the kind of government and the kind of society that we should be and we should have. And we can't be in a place as a party and as a government where we are further embedding this interventionist state into our society. Because Lee's absolutely bang on. You go to red wall seats, places like the ones that we represent, they're actually probably the most libertarian demographic anywhere in this country, and the idea that being a bit more lefty and a bit more Labour is going to appeal to them and keep them on side is nonsense. The very reason they're here is because they're fed up of the Labour Party and everything that they stand for. They know who's got cervixes, for a start, and they're quite happy to explain that one. And as long as Keir Starmer's quite happy to give his explanation, they'll probably keep voting for us. But they are exactly as everyone on the panel has described. The communities that we represent are people who just want to be able to keep a bit more of their own money, to to have a bit more of their own choice. Maybe if they can afford holiday, we'll be happy. I'm excited. Being on the sunshine. And to be able to make those choices about their lives, what car they drive. We're not going to ban their perfectly good Ford Fiesta of yesteryear, because it's still running and it still works and it's relatively cheap, and I don't need an electric vehicle quite yet, thanks, not least because I've got a terraced house and I can't have a charger on the side of me. We've not figured that one out quite yet either. And as the leader of a council tasked with rolling out those charging points to terraced properties, that's going to be really interesting over the next few years. Look, so we are in this place, right, and we as a party have got to decide. And now is the time we've got to decide, faced with this legislation that's coming forward, faced with this environment that we've built for ourselves, and we can argue about necessity and what's been needed and what's not over the last 18 months, but Jacob's absolutely right. We've got to roll that back as quickly as we can, and we cannot drift for 20 years with those kind of interventions and limitations on people's lives and choices. So now's the time, right, and everybody on this panel, I'm sure, will have things to say about some of that legislation when it comes forward over the next few months. He'll probably say it on TikTok. Or in Guido. We'll work through it. And this is the room full of people who's got to fight those battles as well, right? Because we can stand up and say it, and we'll get told off probably. But you guys have got to stand up and say it too, and say it to the rest of this conference, and come to these fringe events and ask questions and make your case too, because we're all in it together. And the more we fight for freedom, the more free we will be.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, panel. Right, there's a room full of people that have got to fight for that freedom. That should have you fired up. And you should be queuing up at that mic just now. So, who is going to step up? We've got a hand come forward.
Oh, you're there.
Oh, is that there's a lot of rumours in the press that 3 Labour MPs might be defecting. And whilst as a raging Tory, I think it's great that we're going to potentially increase our majority by 3. But at the same time, is it not indicative of the fact that we've become so like Labour that, people are willing to jump ship? And also quickly, Jacob, I've heard that they're looking for a new James Bond. Could you be the man?
Well, I think I can stand in honour of that question. In all the years I've been going to party conference, that is the most flattering question I've ever been asked. I can assure you that has left me neither shaken nor stirred. But unfortunately, I've got to go off in a moment to my next appointment. So can I just say a word of defence both of Parliament in what Ben was saying, and also Boris Johnson. Because I cannot tell you how pleased I was to read the leaks from Dominic Cummings. Because what Dominic Cummings was trying to do was to undermine Boris Johnson by saying that he had been reluctant to take away our liberties. And every time I read what our Prime Minister had said, I thought, thank heavens we've got a Prime Minister who is on our side. And I'm not pretending it's been easy. Thank you, somebody agrees with me. And it's not Nanny, who I've already had. But that was great, because the Prime Minister only agreed to take away our freedoms when the case was made to him and he felt there was no other choice. Now, you may not agree that he was right. As it happens, I do. I think he had to make those choices, but that at least every time he needed to be persuaded, and when Dominic Cummings tried to expose him for not taking away our freedoms willy-nilly, I thought, thank heavens, we were led by Boris Johnson rather than Keir Starmer, Jeremy Corbyn, or frankly, quite a lot of our own side, who would have taken away our freedoms with glee. And then, Ben, thank you for saying that you're going to make arguments in Parliament, because that's what Parliament is for. Zoom Parliament has been awful. We have had, I'm sorry to say, 3-minute speeches of utter tediousness that have had nothing to do with the matter under debate. They haven't been a debate. They've just been people preparing speeches and zooming them in. What we want is proper debate, because when Ben stands up and says, look, I don't like this clause of the online harms bill, when it gets to their lordship's house and Claire says, are we sure this is what we want to do? Governments do listen. If you win the argument in Parliament, ultimately things change, and that's how our democracy works. So, can I cheer you all up a bit? Yeah. I know, and I'm not going to start singing, even though I've got the microphone, because that definitely would cheer you up. It's been a horrible 18 months. We as Conservatives have hated taking away people's freedoms. We've loathed the control that has been on our own lives. We've loathed the fact that those of us who are MPs, we can't see our own constituents. We weren't able to see members of our own family. But we're coming out of that. And these liberties must be restored, and you must carry on campaigning for it, because that's what we stand for. And it ties in with being blue-collar Conservatives. Why do we support this? Why was what David's saying so true? It's because Benjamin Disraeli recognised the absolute value and the equal value of every individual in this society, and that the job of government was to improve the condition of the people who you could trust to want to improve their own lives. And if we go back to that fundamental conservatism, you can be reassured that the party that you support is here for you, and we will legislate, we will do things that you want, and the Online Harms Bill will become a bill promoting freedom of speech in a whatnot sphere, rather than being something that limits freedom of speech. I'm sorry I can't stay longer, but thank you for all you do. Don't lose heart, don't forget to campaign for freedom, and back the marvellous Esther. Thank you.
Big cheer for Jacob Rees-Mogg, and a wave of your balloon if you've got hold of one, please. Yay! That's what we want to say. Philip Davis, there was another part of that question. The 3 Labour MPs are possibly coming to the Conservative Party. Now, do we want these people to cross the floor? I mean, what does that say about the Conservative Party that 3 Labour MPs felt that they might want to join us? I think that was the first part of the question.
Yeah, well, probably Lee would be a better person to answer the question than me. I mean, I'm not entirely sure I believe the story, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I think these stories are usually made up of a load of old nonsense, and it's when the papers haven't got anything to write about it. I'm looking at some of the journalists in the room, they just make something up. They make something up that nobody can deny or confirm or whatever. It's easy to do it. So I don't actually generally believe in those questions. I was trying to think which 3 Labour MPs would it be. And I couldn't even think of 3 Labour MPs who had any I just don't, but I think it was a fair point to say, you know, should we be slightly concerned? And I think the answer is yes, we probably slightly should. That 3 sort of hardcore Labour MPs who have stood for election under the Jeremy Corbyn banner and campaigned to get Jeremy Corbyn elected as Prime Minister would feel comfortable within the current Conservative Party. I mean, I think that should send a bit of a shock down our system. It certainly sends one down mine. So if it was true, I would be worried in that regard. But in all honesty, I probably don't believe it's true at all.
Do you know anything, Lee?
No. I mean, I don't think it's true, to be honest with you, but I will say this. When I was in the Labour Party, I was in the Labour Party for many, many years, and it wasn't until I really got involved with the Labour Party from 2012 onwards, when I actually worked for a Labour MP, that I actually realised what the Labour Party was all about, you know, close up and personal. When we used to go to group meetings on the council, they were more interested in talking about Palestine than poverty.
Yeah.
When Fidel Castro died a few years back, they wanted to open a book of condolence at the council. Imagine such nonsense at our local council. And then one morning I woke up and I thought to myself, I'm in the same party as Brian Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn, and John McDonnell. And I was waking up with cold sweats for months and months and months, and then fortunately for me, I was a good friend of Ben at the time, and he knew I was going through a torrid time. It was like being in an abusive relationship. That's what it's like being in the Labour Party, because, like I said, Labour voters and Labour supporters, probably about 5 or 6 million of them voted for us at the first time at the 2019 election. They're all scum now, by the way. And you know what, come the next election, when I'm telling my mum and dad, and my sisters and my brother-in-laws that you're scum because you voted Conservative for the first time, guess who they're going to vote for? They're going to vote for me. So quite frankly, yes, I was a Labour councillor, but I don't want these Labour MPs because, like Phil says, these are stood on a ticket to get Jeremy Corbyn elected. They're very dangerous people.
Can we
Wolverhampton, and like places like Mansfield and Ashfield, I've seen the damage that lockdowns can do to places like Wolverhampton. And whilst it's great that we can all be here this evening, we're in Manchester, cheek by jowl, many of you will know that the government has kept some powers in reserve. There is a plan B for the winter in case hospitalisation rates go up. So my question is, what can we do? What can you do as MPs and peers? What can we do as blue-collar Conservatives to ensure that these restrictions are banished, vaccine passports put into the dustbin of history where they belong, and ensure that we never have another lockdown ever again? Thank you.
Simple answer. We've got to vote against the extension of emergency legislation. We've got to vote against things that aren't right, and you as constituents, you've got to write to your MP and lobby them to make sure that they vote against it too.
I was interested in what Jacob said when he did his, hymn to Parliament, because that's what I want Parliament to be like. But that isn't actually the way it feels, because there's a huge amount of pressure on people. That was what I was trying to say. If you challenge some of these regulations, you get denounced as a COVID denier, all of the rest of it, right? Some libertarian lunatic. That's kind of like sneer. And that's what I'm saying, that comes from the government. But what I wanted to say was, it's not, to me, just the legislation that we've got as a problem. I think what's really happened over the last 18 months is that the argument that safetyism should trump freedom has been won amongst many people, right? And people have lost their confidence in a way. A lot of people have had the stuffing kicked out of them. And when you actually demobilise millions and millions of people and tell them to sit at home, sit on the couch and take their instructions, tell them that they're not, that when people were volunteering to help, they were actually effectively not contacted. They were basically told, you don't count, right? And so it's not that I want to say that there should have been no lockdowns ever or anything, but it was the way that people were treated as though they were to wait to be told by the experts how to live. I think people have lost their confidence. So what I say is, we don't just need to vote against, which is important, that legislation, but we need to make the case for a free society, and we need to make the case for people's capacity to be trusted, right? And that's a different thing, and I think we've been too complacent about freedom yourself. I'm used to doing it in free speech. You go JSML, you think you're going to win an argument. It's lazy, right? We've got to find new arguments, new generational arguments, make the case all over again for why freedom counts, why free speech is important, and it's going to be tough. We've been complacent. We have, myself, all of us, right? So I think we've got a task on our hands, but I do think the ordinary people will be receptive to it, but don't let's assume it's going to happen. It's a tough job. That's why I think that's why I like this organisation, because I like to believe that you might be part of that fight, an ally that I can see across the left-right divide.
I'll make a practical point here, because the truth is the government doesn't necessarily have to bring this back to the House at all. The really pernicious piece about the coronavirus emergency legislation was not that it gave the government extra power. They already had those powers. There's the very well-named 1984 Public Health Act. It would be 1984, wouldn't it? And there's also a thing called the Civil Contingencies Act. And that was passed under Blair back in 2003. And even Tony Blair accepted that when you're going to decide to lock people up, put them under house arrest, deny them access to this, their jobs and holidays and their families and so on, and funerals and weddings, even Tony Blair recognised that he had to come back to the House of Commons within 7 days to get it approved. That was removed in the coronavirus emergency legislation, so the government can actually do it without it, if they chose to. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we won't win the bloody vote. Let's be clear. Labour will not be brave enough to stand up for this. So, if there's 100 of us, we still won't win, all right? So your primary weapon, and I know this from my days when when we're only 150 of us in Parliament against Blair. Your primary weapon is embarrassment. You have to make the argument and embarrass the hell out of the other side. Because these arguments are not scientific. You want to know how the government's been making decisions this last 18 months? Look at the Cabinet Office budget for focus groups and opinion polls. It's the biggest in history. We have been having a policy driven by opinion polls, not by science. And what we have to do is move those polls, move those opinions, talk to our constituents, talk to our MPs, and make sure they know that these policies are just bloody nonsense. And they're very un-British, they're very out of our historic tradition of freedom and belief in independence for ourselves. And that's why we have to make the argument, and we damn well have to win it this time.
Douglas Murray said that if you allow people to have different cultural values, and that includes the value they place on education, you shouldn't really stress out too much if people have different educational opinions. So what do you think about that?
I'd say the first thing is we've got to make sure that our children are in school, that our children are being educated, that our children are going to have exams, and we don't have a polarisation within the education system. So I think the first thing is getting our children back in schools. And if people have different outcomes, that's fine. Different people specialise in different ways, and people have got strengths in different ways, and that is great, because we need everybody to make the world go round. We can't be job snobs either. We need somebody to dig the foundations as much as we need somebody to convey a house. We need somebody to do the roof as much as we need somebody to do the interior design. So I think it is wonderful that we've got lots of different people with lots of different talents, and let's teach them all, but see the potential of every child. But at the moment, we need to make sure that our children are back in school. And I would always say the parents have the final decision over what happens to their children. And I'm talking children 12 to 15, and it should not be the state imposing what happens to those children.
The biggest driver of that education inequality and that outcome inequality is kids who haven't been in school the last 18 months. My kids are lucky enough to have been able to go all the way through. Aren't we lucky? Middle class kids with a good home and a loving family. It's the kids who don't have that, who have been stuck at home in abusive homes, or in homes where parents aren't looking out for them, aren't teaching them at school. They're the ones who are going to fall further and further behind. And ultimately that comes back to taking away those freedoms, taking away their ability to get out and live in the real world and see their friends and learn and get on in life. And that's the ultimate impact of the last 18 months. But on attainment, I think the biggest thing, and again it comes back to the kind of communities that we represent, right? We're always very guilty of imposing our middle class fancy values on people who don't necessarily share them. We've talked for years about how everybody needs to go to university, and that is the market of success. But actually, go try and train as a brickie at the minute, you earn more than a solicitor. And it's well worth doing. I quite fancy a change of career. It seems a nice lifestyle. There's an opportunity here for us to change things, and off the back of everything we're trying to do in the levelling up agenda. The skills bill is really positive, the chance to get more into technical and vocational learning, but it's not for us to tell people what to do, it's for us to give people the choice and to make clear what the options are, and that's the bit we struggle with still, to have that opportunity for young people in seats like ours to actually know what's out there, to be able to lift that head up and aspire to university wherever they want to, but to know what else is there and what they can do at college and what jobs are available to them in our communities. It's a big autumn actually, because we've got loads of decisions in the spending review and the levelling up white paper about what that means and what we can support those communities to do. Chance to get it right. So I hope that we'll take the chance.
Excellent. Next question.
Thank you.
Hiya, my name's Cohen. I just wanted to raise this kind of policy of learned helplessness among the electorate seems to be creeping into pretty much every government department and policy. So take, for example, the high-fat salt sugar advertising ban. This is something that's not supported by evidence. It will remove about 40 calories a year from a child's diet. I'm not sure how that's going to contribute to solving the obesity solution. It's not pro-business, it's not pro-liberty, and it's not pro-individual choice. And yet, we're seeing incredible resistance from the Department of Health, from DCMS, from generally government across the board to even listening to evidence or conservative values. Esther, I know that when you were in Cabinet, you were quite instrumental in striking this down the first time. And I was just wondering, why is this situation different, and why, especially a party led by Boris Johnson, is pushing this?
Yeah, I'll stick to the second question, because it's one of my favourite subjects about the nanny state stuff on the obesity strategy and all this kind of thing, which I'm absolutely apoplectic about, to be perfectly honest. And we shouldn't. It's really important that you raised it, because we shouldn't run away with the idea that this erosion of freedoms is just about COVID and over the last 18 months, and that we're then going back to normal and we're all going to believe in freedom again. You're absolutely right to highlight this. You know, how on earth can any self-respecting Conservative agree with the premise that we should be banning special offers in supermarkets of products that the Department of Health consider to be unhealthy? I mean, how on earth can any Conservative possibly think that that's a sensible thing to do? And yet this Conservative government is doing that. We're actually going to be banning buy one get one free offers in the supermarket of products that the Department of Health think are bad for you to buy. It's absolutely outrageous. We're here as blue-collar Conservatives trying to stick up for working families, people who are struggling. We've got an issue with the cost of living. And what is the government doing? Banning buy one, get one free offers, telling people you don't know what to buy, you're not capable of making the decision as to what products to buy in the supermarket, and we know what's best for you. And what's best for you is we're going to put the prices up for you of those products that you want to buy because we don't think they're good for you. And this is a Conservative government doing this. I'm absolutely apoplectic about it, and everyone here should be apoplectic about it as well. And I just can't even begin to think. You know, Jacob said, the government didn't really want to take away these freedoms and all this. I wish I shared that. I mean, I didn't notice Matt Hancock looking particularly troubled when he was taking away our freedoms. But the Department of Health is still pushing forward with this policy, and we should, as Conservatives, be resisting this with everything we've got. Because if we can't even trust people to decide what products to buy in the supermarket, what on earth are we going to trust them with? These are the people we trusted them to vote Conservative at the election and make that decision, but we're not going to trust them to decide what products they can buy in the supermarket. We should be absolutely ashamed of ourselves as a Conservative party. So it's not just about COVID. This is probably the worst example of restricting people's freedoms. We shouldn't forget we've also got the highest tax rate we've had since the Second World War under a Conservative government, where we actually believe that people are better at spending their own money than the state is for them. We're doing all of these things. So we shouldn't just think this is a COVID issue. This is a freedom crisis that we've got within the heart of the government at the moment, and we've got to fight these things.
It's worth saying, fundamentally, this comes down to doing the easy thing instead of the right thing, doesn't it, in my head? When you've got these challenges with obesity, right, it's a real challenge. When you've got all sorts of problems in society, this lady talks about education, that's the answer, right? We lock people up in a state institution for 14 years of their life, and if they're coming out at the end of it not able to decide whether they want one Mars bar or two, then we're not doing a great job of education from that perspective. Oh, well, that's the key. We're going back and teaching people about those choices, about finance, about cooking. This man, a couple of weeks ago, was in a local comprehensive school, teaching people how to cook with ingredients that you can get if you're going down the food bank. We're making dishes that cost, 50p a pound each, that you can cook a meal of 6 for £2. But if people don't know how to do that, that's the problem. And if leaving school we're not able to do that, that's the fundamental issue. So it's very easy to ban things, it's very easy to step in and say, well, if you're not capable, frankly, then we're not going to let you. But it comes back ultimately to catching people young and catching people in a place where you can teach them those basic life skills, how to finance, how to manage risk as well, because we don't do that anymore. We just try and take away the risk instead of letting people make those choices. Gambling Act is the prime example. You know what, rather than let you decide what's the right amount of money for you to stick on a fixed odds betting machine, we're just going to say it's £2 and you can get stuffed, which is not my approach to freedom anyway. But that's the choice, right? We've got to take on the difficult battle instead of just doing the easy short-term thing all the time that might look nice on the front page of the Daily Mirror.
I think when I made the wisecrack earlier, that Nanny knew what she was doing and the Nanny state doesn't, this is the best possible example. Since 1970, the state has been given advice on what the right diet is and healthcare, and every single year since then, heart disease has increased, strokes have increased. The state does not know what it's doing. We are better judges on average and in total than some man locked up in the Department of Health. So you're absolutely right, we should knock this down, get rid of it altogether. Can I just deal with the online harms bill? I mean, I don't know how many people know much about it, but it does two things. It says to the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, you will not allow people to use your platform if they want to say something illegal. Fine. They also say you must not allow somebody to use your platform if they say something which is legal but harmful. Right? And the penalty for getting this wrong is 10% of your revenue. Now, I don't know how many of you have followed the extent to which the big platforms have suppressed freedom of speech in the COVID debate already without any incentive to do it. I do not want Mark Zuckerberg to make decisions about my freedom of speech. I don't want Facebook or Google or Twitter or anybody else to make those decisions. If we are going to restrict freedom of speech, we do it on the basis of law set in our Parliament. And that's the answer, not the online harms bill. So we must either change it or defeat it. And I will be seeking help from my colleagues to do exactly that in the coming year.
Excellent. We're going to bring tonight to a close. I want to give the final words here. So we've all had hopefully a good discussion. Hopefully we're all fired up, but I'm going to give the final words to Claire here this evening.
Thank you for having the most uncomfortable seating arrangement. I do agree with Philip that the public health issue is going to be one of those things. The thing is, it's not just COVID. COVID brought to the fore the trends that were already there, which was to use public health concerns and to deploy fear around health and around safety to restrict liberty. I mean, they wouldn't have got away. It's not like you're going to go, well, why did everybody go along with that? Because that had been going on for a long time, so it just kind of heightened it. So I absolutely agree on that. I wanted to say something about the online harms bill that's slightly different, online safety bill, what it's called, that's slightly different, which is when we were campaigning for Brexit and subsequent to voting for Brexit, one of the main attacks that was used, you will remember from particularly Labour and Lib Dems, but actually the Remainers in the Conservative Party, was that the reason why people voted to leave was because they were misinformed and they didn't understand the arguments, they were manipulated by a Russian boss, they saw her side of a bus, they were completely stupid, you know. And our response, right, was to say, you don't trust voters in this country. We fought for the vote for every working person to be treated equally at the ballot box. And you don't trust them, right? And because they voted the wrong way, you think they're stupid. Now, the online safety bill is making that illegal because they're saying that anyone who puts up misinformation or disinformation, the big tech companies will say they shouldn't hear it because the assumption is that millions of people are kind of thick, stupid knuckle draggers who, if they see the wrong bit of information on Facebook, will kind of become a bigot or do something wrong. Right? That's what they think. And all I'm saying is, when I say they, I'm just saying who wrote this legislation, who's pushing it. I know that the Labour Party aren't going to oppose it, but why is the government pushing it? And it's a trust question for me. They don't trust ordinary people to rear their children, feed themselves, or actually look online without kind of becoming a bigot and going mad, right? And a conspiracy monger, right? We have to trust people to make mistakes, because we all do. And also, actually, I think generally, if you ask ordinary people, they're going to get it right rather than wrong. Right, final thing, because I've got to do this. I am delighted to be here. I don't think that all Tories are scum. I said all Tories. It would be wrong to say that over the years I have never shouted Tory scum. I think, if I'm honest. Right. However, I do think this goes beyond left and right. That's what I was going to say. It goes beyond party politics. So because my office will kill me if I don't do this. At the weekend, next weekend, we have the Battle of Ideas Festival in London. And the Battle of Ideas Festival has 75 panel debates, hundreds of speakers, and people from beyond left and right. And you're all welcome. The reason why I'm saying it is because we've actually genuinely got to have lots more public conversations that go beyond party politics. And we've got to start organising, or a free society won't be free for long. This is serious.
Excellent. I want to thank everybody who's come here this evening. We had to put a limit on who could come in. There was 200 people on the waiting list who couldn't get in, so you've been here now. You might not think you were the fortunate ones. But it was wonderful that you could be here. Really, really pleased. Well, we have got mementos, things that you can buy and take away. That is mugs, that is cufflinks, notes of the Nanny State cufflinks. We made everything free for this evening for you to come in, but as we pay for everything, please, if you want, there's some blue buckets there, make a donation, and the fight does start here. It really does. We're doing it. You must do it too, because we must fight for our freedoms, because remember those words of Sir Richard Dearlove, who could not believe the British public gave up their freedoms more than anybody in Russia during the Cold War. He could not believe it. So we've got to fight for our freedoms. Thank you.